Now to make our dragon fruit wine, we will be using the following. I've got 6 pounds of ripe dragon fruit, 3½ cups of sugar, the juice of 1/4 of a lemon. This time around, I'm going to be using a Red Star Premier Classic wine yeast, primarily because of its alcohol tolerance of 13%, and it's designed to bring out intense color and excellent flavor complexity while preserving tannin content. Now, of course, if you don't have that, this still works. Now, we'll be using about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of regular bread yeast. And the reason for that is that once we add it to boiling water and kill off the yeast cells, it will act as a yeast nutrient for our regular wine yeast. Once again, if you don't have wine yeast, you can use bread yeast as your fermenting yeast. I'm going to be using straining bags, but this, of course, is optional. I'll need a gallon of clean filtered water. We'll need a wide mouth fermenter to do our primary fermentation in. It's got to have a wide mouth because we need to be putting our fruit and or straining bags inside. After a week of primary fermentation, we'll need to transfer or rack our juice from our primary fermenter into our secondary carboy, which is a process that we'll repeat every 6 or 8 weeks or so until the wine is clear enough for our liking or taste to our liking. We will need an airlock with bung to fit inside our secondary carboy to allow CO2 gases to escape and keep bugs from getting in. I should point out that our primary fermenter does have its own built-in airlock. If yours does not, then you'll need an airlock for that as well. We're going to need an 8-quart pot. This is also optional, but it's very helpful to have a hydrometer with testing tube to allow us to determine how much total alcohol is present in our wine. And of course, using your food grade sanitizer of choice, whether it's One Step, Star San, or other suitable sanitizer, we want to make sure all of our equipment has been properly cleaned and sanitized before we begin making this wine. And of course, that is what I'm going to be using to make this wine. All right, let's begin this process by scooping out the contents of our dragon fruit, which in this case happens to be the light version of the dragon fruit. Scoop that out. Let's get as much of this as possible. And we just want to give this a rough chop. Go ahead and get that into the straining bag. And continue on with the process. Now, because we are dealing with the light version of the dragon fruit instead of the red, I want to try and give it a little bit more color. So I'm going to use the outer skins as well. All I want to do there is to peel off any of the green foliage that's on it. And I'll just do this real quickly because I want to just show you. Trim off the ends. And of course, this had more foliage than I thought. Just peel them all off. And go ahead and give those a rough chop. And then get those into a straining bag. All right, I could have chopped them all up, but you know what? I think enough is enough. So I'm going to just go ahead and tie these off, and let's get these in a pot. Now I've poured off about a cup of our water, and that's to make a little bit of room for the sugar that we're about to put in later, and also to account for some of the juice that the fruit will give off. If we're trying to make a 1-gallon batch, if you're making a 4-liter batch, then you can go ahead and leave in the whole gallon of water. Cover back on, and let's bring that up to a boil. All right, now that our water has come to a good rolling boil, we can go ahead and drop in our 1/4 to a 1/2 teaspoon of bread yeast, which again is acting as our yeast nutrient, which needs to be in a dead state before it can be of any use to our live nutrient. We can go ahead and turn off the heat. Won't be needing that anymore. And we can go ahead and begin adding in our 3½ cups of sugar. Since the water is hot, it should dissolve relatively quickly. Yeah. All right. Following that, the next thing we want to do is go ahead and add in our dragon fruit. The reason why we're adding it in now is because A, we want to kill off any wild yeast that might have been on the fruit, and we want to make sure that we can also kill off some of any harmful bacteria that might be on there. Put our lid back on, and we can wait for that to come down to room temperature. All right, with our juice now come down to room temperature, let's go ahead and add in our 1/4 wedge of lemon, which is all that we need to provide just a little bit of acidity. Adding in the skins gave it a pretty nice color. I like that. We don't really want to get any lemon seeds in there, so let's go ahead and strain it out. Just a good squeeze to do. I mean, you don't have to scrape off the edges or anything. And for the moment, let's put our cover back on. All right, now with our freshly sanitized spoon and hydrometer and tube, we're going to go ahead and take our initial hydrometer reading. Let's give that a little stir, and let's squeeze down on some of the fruit, help them release a little bit of sugar before I take this reading. All right, looks like our hydrometer reading is coming in at 1.066. All right, the next thing we need to do is to transfer our juice from the pot to the fermenter. And I think having both been sanitized, I'm going to start by transferring the fruit. And then trying my best to transfer the juice. Put our lid back on and move on to the next step. Now, to begin the process of turning our juice into wine, we of course will need to add in our yeast. I generally use a 1/4 teaspoon of yeast per gallon. You can use more if you like. I generally tend to spread my yeast kind of evenly across the top. You may choose to hydrate your yeast or however you feel most comfortable doing it. I've had success doing it this way, so this way I'll have success. Get that in there. Give it a little swirl to get it off these bags. Put my cover back on. And take another opportunity to point out that this fermenter does have a built-in airlock. If yours doesn't, you will need to get an airlock for your fermenter. Okay, it is now time to label our creation. We are making a dragon fruit wine. We started it on this date, and our original gravity or starting gravity was 1.066. Okay, so what happens next will be this. For the next 3 days at least, we want to go ahead and take our cap off, and with a freshly sanitized spoon, we're going to go ahead and give our must a nice vigorous stir for 2 reasons, especially for those of you who are not using straining bags to break up a cap of fruit that will be floating on the top, preventing your yeast from getting oxygen. And for those of you with straining bags, it will give your yeast just a little bit more oxygen to work with. And you can do that for the next 3 days. Okay, following that, you've got up to 5 days, but I use it 3 days to be safe. Following that, you don't want to stir it up anymore, because then you begin to run the risk of adding too much oxygen and start the process of possibly oxidizing your wine. Now, of course, we're going to leave the fruit in the primary wide valve fermenter for at least a good 5 to 7 days, and I'll go ahead and take it out, and I'll go ahead and let it continue to ferment for another 2 or 3 weeks, after which I will probably rack it or transfer it from this fermenter into a second fermenter, which is a carboy that I showed earlier. And we'll continue that process every 6 to 8 weeks or so until the wine has become clear enough, or until the wine is ready to our liking. Generally, I like to leave it in the carboys for about 7 or 8 months before I bottle it, and then I will begin the tasting of it at the 12-month mark. During the bottling process, I'll degas it, and I will back sweeten it if necessary, and it usually is necessary to sweeten it to my taste. And then again, at the 12-month mark, we'll crack open a bottle and see what it tastes like. So, here we go. Dragon fruit wine. Initial process. See you in 12 months. And if you like what you see here, click on that subscribe button. Become a member or become a patron. I would appreciate it. Oh, one other thing. Everything that I've used here, I purchased with my own money, and therefore you can find Amazon links to everything in the comment and description sections below the video. So, I'll see you when this one's done.